And I would now like to introduce our presenters for the next session. And we have with us Madeleine Hopkins, who is a qualified trainer facilitator with over 35 years of experience in adult education. She has worked both in the vet sector and in the private practice. Maddie specializes in teaching and mentoring action methods in training, and which is a highly successful technique in both skill acquisition and retention. Annie Fraser has a background in health education and has worked as a nurse educator for the past 15 years. She has worked at the Institute of Liver Studies in London, the Cancer Council in New South Wales as a nurse educator, and also she worked at Justice Health and Forensic Mental Health at St. Vincent, Sydney in a wide variety of educational roles. So thank you both, Annie and Maddie, for being here, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you, UTAS, for the invite for us to be able to present today. I'm just trying to get my screen to change. Here we go. So I would like to do an acknowledgement of country, because all of the work that we're going to talk about today and the pictures that you're going to see are from the work that we've done in South East Sydney Local Health District. So I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of the Darawal, Gadigal, Wongal, Gweagal and Bidjigal peoples as the traditional custodians of the land we operate on. We pay our respects to ancestors and elders, both past and present. SESLHD is committed to honouring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land, waters and seas, and their rich contribution to society.
And we'd also like to acknowledge the teachers of these lands, past, present and to come.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Maddie now and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I don't know how many of you would have heard of action method, but it's a technique and training which has its roots in psychodrama, not to be confused with action learning. It is different to that. Bit of a paradox. Students learn in groups. Students learn at their own pace. And that's an interesting thing where you've got these two truths in the same place. And action method deals with this rather nicely. Now, what action method does, it takes training from the passive to the active. So it takes it away from lecture style and brings it into an active practice and rehearsal. In other words, it makes the invisible visible. I think, was it Vicky, who was our last speaker? You were talking about simulation, I think, Vicky. Nod if that's true. Yes. And yes, it was. So where you can't do simulation and where it's tricky, then you use action method. Okay. Literally anything can be done in action method, from learning about how to accurately give medication to how to look up, use policies and procedures and legislation. Action method divides the work equally, but or not so equally, but a lot of the work is done by the participants and you're there to direct the learning as it goes on. Okay. A lot of facilitators using this technique in SESLHD, which is where we work at the moment, say they no longer come out of the end of a training day feeling exhausted. Rather, they feel like, wow, that was pretty good. So one of the important skills in action method is the use of directives. So for example, to use a directive, you would say, everyone stand up, rather than a question, would you like to stand up? Or a desire, I want you to stand up. So to give you an example of this, so that there's absolutely no ambiguity when you're directing a group, you might say something like, in chunks, everyone stand up, find someone you haven't worked with much today, sit down with that person, now discuss the three parts of the last policy we discussed. Now, the room setup and action method's very important. We completely do away with tables. We set up the chairs in a horseshoe shape. Belongings are at the back of the room, so the room is completely clear in case there's a trip hazard, because people don't stay on the chair that they first come in with. It's very important that you do the warm-up within the first 30 seconds, because you have to grab the group straight away and you've got to get them used to those directives. So done well, warm-ups will build rapport in the group very quickly. It will often mitigate resistance. You know, when you get those resistant people coming into the room, it will do away with that resistance, and there's a technique for that. Unfortunately, we won't go into that today. We'll just leave that as a little mystery. Have a look at the picture that you're seeing in front of you now. This was a group of people that didn't know each other. 45 minutes later, on the right-hand side, the woman reaching out, she's a preemie baby. And she's reaching out to the nurse who's right beside her, who's giggling. The two ladies that are standing at the back, they're breasts. And Annie will tell you a bit more about breasts in a moment. Annie, over to you.
Wonderful. All right. So with that rather wonderful, moving on to me. So what I'd like to talk about here is carry on that conversation about warm-ups. So one of the first things that I've learned, I've been doing this type of training now using action methods for about 11 years, and Maddie's decades ahead of me, but I've been doing this for about 11 years in various different areas with various different specialities. And the most important thing is the warm-up. And I've noticed over the years as an educator, these warm-ups really work to make the group psychologically safe. When I first started using these, I started thinking, oh, that was a good group that day, and that was a really good group that day. But actually, no, it's the fact that I started doing this and warming that group up and making them feel safe and psychologically safe to learn. So if we look at these Venn diagrams, the top one there is around warming up the individual to being there, individual to the group, and then the group to the tasks. That's like a group warm-up. And then underneath, looking at the individual warm-up. So the individual to being there, the individual to you as a trainer, so a one-on-one training opportunity, and then warming up that individual to you and the task. So we might just do a demonstration of that, Maddie, yeah? If we can demonstrate a one-on-one facilitator and learner.
Okay, I'll be the trainer.
Wonderful.
Annie, you're going to be the learner.
Okay.
So just put your imagination hats on and here we go. Hello, Annie. What are you here for today?
I'm here to learn about medication, particularly around endone.
Endone.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's find out what you already know about endone. So imagine that I'm trying to get myself on the screen. Imagine that by opening your two hands like this, really wide. I'm trying to get that way. Okay. If we do it like this, that you know absolutely everything there is to know about endone. This means that you know absolutely nothing about endo, or that's somewhere in the middle. So know everything, arms really wide, know nothing like this, or I know a little bit. Where would you be?
I know a little bit.
You know a little bit. Okay.
I'm in the middle.
You're in the middle. All right. So just to start with, what forms does endone come in?
Tablet, suppository, liquid.
Yep, that's exactly right. Now, choose one of these and you're going to be it. So would you like to be a tablet? Would you like to be liquid? Or perhaps you might like to be a suppository.
I think reviewing those choices, I'm going to go tablet.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. What a shame.
Yeah.
All right. So be endone.
Okay. So I'm the actual tablet.
You're the tablet now.
Okay. All
what
right.
packaging do you come in?
Like a blister pack in a box.
And what do you look like when I pop you out of the blister pack?
I'm round and I'm white.
Right. So you're white. Where will I find you in the hospital? Can I just find you lying around somewhere?
No, I'm in a locked cupboard. I'm in a Schedule 8, Schedule 4 locked cupboard.
Schedule 8. So
Mm.
with that, can I give that to a patient myself? Can I give you to a patient all by myself?
No, there needs to be two of you, two nurses, to sign that in the book, in the schedule book, and on the prescription
Okay,
online.
right. Can I cut you in half?
No, because I am a set dose, and I also have like a half-life. So I'm designed to work a set amount of time. So I come in different releases.
So you might have a covering over you.
I do have a covering over me, and yeah, like an enteric coating. Yeah.
Okay. If I want to find out more about you, where would I look?
You could look in MIMS. You could look online at that and ask some, or you could ask someone on the ward, one of the other nurses. You could ask a pharmacist.
Mhm. All right, we'll finish it there for this demonstration. Annie, can you come back and be Annie again?
I'm going to be Annie again, not a
Oh,
suppository.
All right,
Yeah.
you don't like being a
Not
suppository?
really, no,
Okay.
not today.
All right, thank you, Annie. You can
So
take
thank
over
you,
again now.
wonderful, I'm relieved. So you get the idea. That's a very simplified version of it. But the main thing there is that Maddie just kept asking questions. She asked and asked and asked. The other thing with action method is resist the urge to tell. You keep on asking as a teacher or facilitator. And that's what she kept doing. Where would you find me? Where would I be? Am I this? Am I that? So a very simple demonstration, but essentially keep asking. That's what we teach our facilitators that come to our workshops. So we started off with Maddie showing their hands. You can do that one-to-one, but this is showing that you can also do that in a group. And the great thing about doing this when we do what we call a continuum here, so we've directed people in a very, and I'm English, I struggle with directive language, and even 11 years later, I still struggle with this. But you say, stand up, put yourself on the line where you think you should be if you're doing it a different way, but this way, stand up, make a line, and then the same question that Maddie gave, how much knowledge do you have? This much, this much, this much. So as a trainer, you can see immediately looking down that line, the spread of knowledge in the room. And so obviously the lady furthest on the right, lovely Alison, who's one of our educators, I know that she's quite knowledgeable about this subject, and I can use that to my advantage because I can get her to help me, because obviously there are other people there with their hands closed who know very little about the subject that I've asked. So therefore, the person who knows loads, I've got to now pitch that so that I cover everything. But I use those more knowledgeable staff to help me. And also I've got to work on keeping them engaged. I don't want to lose them. So the activities that we engage in, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, really help to do that. The other thing I want to say here as well, the spotlight is on the group. And I can't remember if Maddie just said that at the beginning, but the spotlight's always on the group in action method. It's not on you as a trainer, it's on the group. And that comes because you are the preparation in this, it's all before you stand up in front of the group. You're very heavily prepared. And then the spotlight's on the learner, which really helps. So coming back to that Venn diagram, the three most important things for that maximum engagement, we've warmed up the individual to being there, warming up the individual to the group. So that was one way of doing it. We just showed you with the hands. The other way we can do it is come into this group here. Again, this was another workshop we went to, and we asked people, we gave the instruction at this end of the line, you walk the line out. At this end of the line, you have the least experience. At the other end of the line, you have the most. In the middle, you have somewhere in the middle. Stand up, put yourself on the line where you think you are. So this is what this group have done. It's an unfortunate picture I chose because some of them look a bit disengaged, but they're not. And what we do then and do throughout our action method activities, continuing to build that psychological safety, we would then put the group, you two together, you three together, however it works. And you get them to talk to each other about why they put themselves there on the line, what their name is and where they work. And then again, you know, you've moved all that group around again. You've broken everybody up, moved them around. Everyone's talking to someone new. And in the first sort of 2 to 3 minutes of a session, of an in-service or a full day or half day, you've got them to do, your group to do the three things that most groups hate. They've stood up, they've spoken publicly, and they've taken part in an activity. And once you've done that, it just keeps building. And when I first did this, I really didn't believe it would work, but it does. People become very psychologically safe and feel much more supported to learn. So there are all sorts of ways you can use that line, but again, we're short of time, so I can't go too much into that, but it's a really good way to warm your group up. And again, to see the spread of knowledge, you know, from the least to the most. So finally on here, that final warming up the group to the task. So the next slide here is around one of the next activities that I ask groups to do. And again, what we give the directive language of stand up, find someone you haven't worked with much today or this morning, form X amount of groups with X number of people, go to the butcher's papers around the room and write down what it is you expect to or you would like to leave knowing today, or what you would like to learn. And what we do is, before we have these sessions each month, we ask our trainers, educators, whoever, to bring topics that they might be struggling with. So the reason this is a real butcher's paper that has come from one of the groups. And I took this photo because it has two of the most common things that come up. How to deliver boring topics, and this one was accreditation, but often they'll say, oh, I've got to, you know, present on a policy or a procedure. Something like that, very dry, difficult to engage the group. And then at the bottom, keep engaged new generation of learners. And I will just jump in and make the obvious statement that human beings' attention spans are getting less and less every year. So there is a lot of research out there about that, but we all know that. And again, this is a really good style. There's many different activities and action method that really grabs our younger learners, as well as all our others. But so much so that the team that I work with, that I used to work, well, I'm seconded from that team, but the wonderful mental health district education team really have used this a lot with their new grad groups. So they deliver about 7 sessions over the year with our new grads. And they haven't replaced everything, but they have put a fair bit of action method in there. And the responses and the evaluations we're getting from that have been amazing. So it's been really well received. Oh, sorry, I thought Maddie was going to say something.
I was going to say the reason that people keep engaged, because we've asked them, is why are you so engaged? And they've said, we don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
So we're having to keep our ears up.
Yeah. And you know, as I said before, that you keep moving those groups around and you're breaking up those cliques. So you'll get the naughty Annies and those little groups of people that we all know exist, and they'll get into their group and they'll giggle and can sometimes be quite distracting. But the great thing about the techniques that I've just talked about very briefly, there are many, many others that I use to keep moving the groups around, keep moving them around. And I go back to what Maddie said initially about setting up the day as well. No tables, no belongings, everything to the back of the room, because we say to people they're all trip hazards because you are not going to be in that chair for long. Up and move, up and move. And it really does work. I used to think it was like, you know, a magic wand, but it really does work, moving people around and getting them to mix. So I've got some more photos here, and again, these are from actual workshops. So you can see the bottom left there, this lady had brought a policy she wanted to talk about around medication administration. And one of the tools that I use in the toolbox is a bunch of A4 paper that's laminated and just blank. Take the texture pens, and I've pre-made little kind of necklaces around them. And we just literally write what comes up, you know. So in this case, it was a policy. You can see there, right dose, right drug, right patient, whatever. And we've written that out. And they're all got their arms on each other's shoulders because they're demonstrating the order this should go in, how the policy should be, and why they're doing what they're doing. And again, resisting the urge to tell. We just keep asking. So, you know, how do you know you're the right dose? You know, how do you check that? How do you know you're the right drug? What would you check? What would you do? Just continually asking. And by now, because of the really good warm up that you've done, the group is really supportive of each other and is really helping each other at this point. So Annie, you don't know who can help Annie here in the room? Who can answer that question for her or help her with the answer? So that's the kind of language. It's always collegial, always supportive. The lady down in the bottom right-hand corner, our lovely educator, Ali, is holding a gavel there and looking quite menacing. She's representing the coroner. Now, I know the coroner doesn't hold the gavel, but we're making the invisible visible, so I used a gavel from a dress-up shop. And when we're talking about policy or we're talking about something that needs to be done, documentation, I can remember, again, these images fly into my head when we were doing documentation. Ali would creep in between people who were listed down in the policy for documentation, or however we set it out, and she would weave in between people looking very menacing, or get closer and closer and closer. And we get our nurses telling us that the next time they sit down to write notes, they remember whether it was Ali or whether it was Diane or whoever it was. They go, oh God, I remember that. That's really scary. So really, really, you know, very strong.
Yeah, it's a good message.
Very
that
good
gets
message.
across.
So moving on to this, now this again was a very recent workshop that we did, and this was a mix of nurses, midwives, and neonatal nurses, mental health nurses, and we had some allied health in there as well. So it was a really interesting mixed group. I learned tons because I do not work with neonatal nurses and midwives usually. But what you're seeing there is, again, the signs around the neck. So this was one of the midwives had said, we teach an in-service to our midwives around well-being and the emotional impact of when things don't go to plan with our mums. And we go back to that first photo. Maddie said I was going to talk about breasts. This was with breastfeeding, and off camera to the right there, to the right, or to Maddie's left, but to our right, are the two ladies standing, being one breast each, representing breastfeeding. But what we've done there is we've set out the midwives there. We've got some in the background. We've got like blood pressure and things like that, because this example was a mum that had a postpartum hemorrhage. Everything was wonderful, everything was exciting. Then mum had a big postpartum hemorrhage, was very unwell. Off camera again is the disinterested partner who's trying to project manage some renovations at home, doesn't quite understand how serious things are. And we set all this up with all the different signs, and then we got the ribbons out and we started to connect. These ladies in the front sitting down are the nurses, and they're hanging on to the ribbons because they're feeling the emotions. They're quite upset as well because they're feeling like, oh, could I have done something better? You know, all of these things that came up. Again, we resisted the urge to tell. We just kept asking the group, what kind of feelings do you experience? What kind of things do you go through?
And one of the people that was participating, she was the actual postpartum bleed, and someone else was the temperature, and someone else was the blood pressure. And this leads you on to what happens when one of those strings is dropped, like
Absolutely.
the blood pressure string.
Yeah.
You were going to talk about that.
Yeah. So if someone drops a ribbon, what do we do about that? You know, what effect might that have? And you see it, you see the ribbon drop from mum to vital observations, or one of the signs was asking mum about their well-being. Sometimes we can forget that. We do all these clinical things and all this interaction, and we're checking this and we're checking that, but we didn't actually ask mum how she felt. So what happens when we drop that ribbon? And we asked mum, we asked the person who was representing mum, how does that feel? And she felt even more vulnerable and even more alone when we dropped that ribbon. The other thing that I love these ribbons for is they become, we've just started on this photo, but it becomes an enormous cat's cradle, and it shows the real complexity of the work that we do. And I like to lay that down on the floor at the end and get everyone to stand back and look at it and sort of admire the hard work that they do and the complexities of the communications that go on, the physical interactions that we have, how that affects mum. The baby was in the corner there reaching out. I mean, they were laughing, but at one point it was very serious. People started to think about those emotions and how they're affecting everybody. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Maddie?
No, I don't think so. I think we're nearing the end now.
Yeah, I think I've talked too long probably.
Yeah.
So this is pretty much our final slide, and I put this up. These are real evaluations from our workshops, and the thing that pops out from most of our evaluations that I read are things like engaging, interactive, workshop was useful, practical activities. It's great seeing fresh faces where they bring new questions and got my brain more switched on. And brought new ideas to my teacher. Now I could have put that evaluation myself, because every time I do this, I'm working with a new set of nurses and midwives from different specialities that I really learn tons from, and how they are, the kind of education that they're providing. So did you want to?
Just one more thing. We'd love you to have a go at this, but don't do it unless you've had a little bit of training somewhere to do it. Because you can run into trouble if you learn nothing else, learn the warm up. After that, you're pretty well right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warm that group up, get the trust going. But to do things like the emotional stuff that we did in that last slide with the ribbons, this one, there were a lot of high emotions when we were doing that. People were remembering things and really engaging in their practice. And there were some tears and some emotion, which we dealt with and cared for the group. And they felt safe to do that, which was lovely. And it was healthy tears, but obviously they were really, engaging with what they were doing.
Okay. I think that's
Our
it.
final slide here, that's my beautiful dogs looking questioningly at you. So happy to answer any questions. That's the reference list of some of the things that we have used. Thank you so much again, UTAS. Sorry for the rough start with the technical glitches, but thank you, Michelle, for sorting that out. And I'm going to hand back over. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie and Maddie. What a wonderful presentation and what a wonderful method. I wish I'd known about it when I was a nurse educator and I think it's absolutely fantastic method. And I can really relate to it as well. So Annie said that she's English, so does struggle with directive language. I'm Dutch, so I don't
Yes.
struggle with directive language because
No,
that's
you
the thing
didn't.
I only know, and that's how I have been brought up. But it's I can see how this can make a difference in education, and I think there are quite a few questions actually already. If you are happy to, I can read them out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just
Oh,
let
he
me.
does. Yeah.
I think there are questions. Here we are. Would this be something viable for a short session instead of a long session?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, you can use it for a very short session, just like I did with Annie just now. And what that does, it gets away from that telling your student. It's constantly asking. Resist the urge to tell. Just keep asking. And I guess the other thing is to say to the student, if they don't know, is to then keep asking by saying, if I wasn't here, where would you go to find out? How would you do that? What are the mechanisms you could use? So we're pushing constantly to get them independent and to problem solve. And it does work, doesn't
Oh,
it?
totally, absolutely. You can do that in very short interactions, which I have done.
Mm-hmm.
And going way off topic here, you can use it. I've done team building with Maddie. I've done a whole day of team building with managers using these techniques. They are extremely useful in all manner of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you. So the other question is, where can you get the training for this method?
I knew that would come up. Yeah,
I knew that.
I'm going to hand over to Maddie.
Okay. I was thinking about that last night and I thought, I know I do it. My learning was done in New Zealand. You probably hear the leaning vowels, so you know that's where I'm actually from. I was trained by some of the best psychodramatists in the world, and I'm seriously in the world. They came from America, from Germany, from Australia. When I was there at the time, Australia was a long way away. So I suppose my advice to you would be, go online and look up psychodrama near me and go to a couple of psychodrama workshops to start with. Now, I'm an educator and there are a couple of people in Sydney that do this, but for the rest of the country, I know in Western Australia, if there is anyone on here from Western Australia, they have the Wasley Centre, which is like the, you know, the shining globe of psychodrama. We do it in Sydney, but around the country, there are psychodrama workshops. So go there first. What I've done is incorporate learning into the psychodrama, but that's your good basis.
Great, thank you. The other question, I teach almost 100% on Zoom. Do you have any hints on introducing these techniques to Zoom teaching?
Oh yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's something interesting. If I don't know if I'm okay to do this, but I did a Zoom recently where people were saying we don't know how to teach action method on Zoom, and we did it, and it actually worked out so well.
So how long did it take? Did you do the hands thing quickly?
It's
No?
a bit tricky to show,
okay, all right.
bit too tricky.
Maybe we could get an invite back.
Yeah, what I was going to say is
Absolutely.
Oh, thanks, Michelle.
if Michelle, if you wanted to do a Zoom session on this, I'd be very happy to do it. If
you might attendees, you might want to put your hands up if you're interested in something like that, or pop it in the feedback at the end of this session. So that would be amazing. Thank you for the offer.
Yeah, be happy to do that.
Thank you. And I think that are the questions at the moment. We can
There's
come back to.
Can I jump in quickly? I can see one. Do you have any warm up for teaching with an
Okay,
established
yes,
60 people department with resistant learners?
Yes, yes, absolutely. If you're, are you talking about, I don't know who put that question in, but if they're talking about teaching 60 people all
Brittany.
at once.
Brittany. Yep.
Yeah, I think it was someone called Brittany.
Yeah.
If you mean you get 60 people in a room and teach them, yeah, there's a way that you can do that. I did one at Royal North Shore Hospital a while ago. I had 200 people. It looked like a prayer meeting. We had their hands up and doing all this, but because I wanted to get a point across and I wanted to show them some of the action method techniques, I got 12 people to come down and I taught those 12 people, and we call this a fishbowl. So the rest of the group were looking down onto the action that was happening. And that worked really, really well. And I know a lot of people came back afterwards and said, right, we want to know more.
I used the fishbowl a lot as well when I was teaching Detect. And Vicky, I know you did some stuff on simulation, and thank you. I'm one of your learners from the past. Wonderful, thank you. I'm just getting my plug in there. But I used action method with simulation as part of our Detect as well. Detect training, or between the flags now. And it worked really well, that fishbowl, because often you've got too many people. So you would do one kind of simulation and get everyone around as observers, but you involve, that's the thing I didn't mention there with action method, everyone is included. You do not leave anybody out. So in one way or another, we include them.
Even people who don't want to be there or don't want to take an active part. I've had it only once where somebody decided to sit out and I gave them the role of the observer. When I came back to do the next activity, asked them if they wanted to be the observer again. They said, no, I don't want to get left out again, thanks.
And one of the other sessions recently, I put extreme pressure on a NES educator. I'm sorry, that NES educator knows who they are. I went, come on. And I forced her to come in. She went, I've got a meeting in half an hour. She was still there 2 hours later. I went, what about your meeting? She went, yeah, I cancelled it. So people are a little bit suspicious, but I can't say enough. I'd probably sound a little bit like a cultish, but it's really changed my practice and helped me re-engage with as being an educator. I love it.